Roy, welcome back, my man.
We out here. How you
Yeah,
doing?
I'm doing well. It looks like it may be a sunny day here in Amsterdam, which is good because in my part of the world right now, sun goes down around 4:30. And
Mm.
so, we have very limited time with the sun these days, which we can get into some of the goofy stuff that I'm up to make sure that I still stay sane.
Mm,
But you're in fucking Bali. So
I am. I
you
am.
are
Shout outs to DHL. They delivered.
they delivered. Did you get your magnesium?
Oh, I did, but I got it from the shop actually.
Okay, cool,
Um,
cool, cool.
got it from the shop close by.
Hmm.
But what's
They
been up on
found.
your side? What? Oh,
Uh,
that. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
so what's been up on my side? Let's get into that. So it's been what, a quarter since we've recorded one of these, and it's fascinating kind of how this year has developed because in previous years I've spent 50% of my time on the road and doing speaking, doing whatever, and it always seemed like you were rushing to the next event, and in between those events you would scramble to do any sort of long-term planning, right?
Mm,
Let alone learn something. And so what's been characteristic of this year is being able to anchor myself in one place, whereas before it was 50% on the road, now it's 95% of my time here in Amsterdam.
yeah.
And we were talking about this when I goofed up the first recording, but uh, it's been amazing to just one, fall in love with the city and appreciate everything that's going on here, but two, being able to get into uh, more learning routines in the sense of some of the people that I talk to all the time, like rather than just constantly trying to quote unquote hack the information and learn at a surface level so that I can be able to talk about it in a smart way. I'm actually being able to go deep on subjects and being able to understand a lot more things. And so that's been enlightening in a way that I'm able
Mm.
to have that experience. And, I'm actually pretty happy with how this year is panned out so far. I know a lot of people out there are struggling, but in this year certainly wasn't what I anticipated, but it's been amazing. And all through all of that, I'm trying to buy a house right now, which is it seems like everybody's trying to do.
Mm.
But you, my friend, are surfing every day, sending videos that make me a little bit jealous, not going to lie. I was supposed to be in Bali in July, but that got delayed. And so tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I got here. As we said, shout outs to DHL, which actually the funny thing was when I found the way I found my passport was I went out for a skate for just like a little cruising with my skateboard,
Mm-hmm.
and I came back and it was not inside my mailbox. It was above the wall, so it was just hanging on there, like my passport was just
Wow.
on the wall. Yeah, it was just out there. Anyway, it was an amazing experience for me. I think we'll be able to talk about that later, but the fact that it happened when I let go.
Mm-hmm.
I got it back and I flew out here and it all panned out the best. But I, we'll talk about Bali in a little bit, I feel like, but I wanna pick out something from what you've said, and
Mm-hmm.
it's more around subjects you learned about.
Yeah.
What did you learn more about? And that I feel like it'll also lead us to some relationship talk and how that pans out for you, because
Yeah.
we've talked about it last podcast.
Yeah. So let's go into some of those things, right? So if you look at my focus has actually been mainly around the idea of how to make better decisions. And
Mm,
a lot of that, so by virtue of the fact that I'm here in Amsterdam all the time and that I work most of my day with the transcriptions team in California, I have periods of my day which are what I would call lower bandwidth, meaning that unless I have client meetings, I can study quite a bit. And so if you take that lens of decision making and say, how do I make better decisions? Well, Daniel Kahneman and a few others have written great books about this. But if you look at the way a human is built and sort of this idea of us kind of having a lazy part of our mind and a very quick decision-making part of our mind, far too many of us are reliant on that quick decision-making part of our mind, or what Daniel Kahneman would call in Thinking Fast and Slow, System 1. System 2 is a very lazy system, but it's a very high bandwidth system. So it's what gets activated when you're trying to learn something new, or when you're really trying to make a complex decision and you don't want to jump to conclusions really quickly. And so a lot of this year has been really, how do I engage that system 2 to make better decisions, mainly from a business perspective. And I can go through some of those books that I've gone through, but the study.
We'll do that later.
Yeah,
we'll definitely do that later.
The study of decision making has brought me anywhere from back to game theory, which is something that I haven't really studied in depth since college, but more looking at it from an evolutionary lens, to neuroscience. And so looking at the components of our brain and how, there are really how we're somewhat handicapped in certain ways to make very complex decisions, and why humans probably after sort of game theory and neuroscience, then comes sort of the social cultural programming and the cognitive biases that we all have. And just, it's been a fascinating study for me. And it's something that I now have integrated in my life every single morning. There's like a chapter from 4 different books that I read, that the hope is that someday I'll just be a much better decision maker as a result of all of this. But I guess I can already see the benefits of it too. And so that's been quite a wonderful experience on the learning side. You mentioned relationships. And so.
Wait, before we run up to that, I'm sorry. What do you incorporate these chapters in your daily routine, you said?
So there's 4 books that I read from every single morning. Some people read things like the Bible. Some people read, whatever sort of spiritual book. I read from these 4 books, and those 4 books are, this won't actually get into the best books of the year, but
it's just like embedded in your daily routine. That's what I wanted to get for myself. So
if you look at kind of in kind of my morning, right? And I'm fortunate enough that I don't have an alarm clock, because I've spent a lot of time kind of ingraining my circadian rhythms. And so when I wake up, which is usually between 5 and 6, I'll start with meditation, right? And that's just something that I've done. I've actually begun to hit that almost 100% of the time now, which is great. Of course, that's after drinking water, but I'll start with a meditation. Then I'll go into reading from these 4 books. And what they do is they're very, very short chapters, but they're on things like cognitive biases. They're on things like mental models. And it's also kind of going a little bit into that neuroscience of System 1 and System 2. And we'll get into some of those books later.
Okay, so let's keep on moving to relationships, because we talked last podcast we did talk about your relationship with your lovely significant other, and you were saying that you weren't used to that kind of mindset of seeing that person every day. So what has this been to you? Like, what has this been like to you as a journey? And then what do you guys do to maintain what you have?
Yeah, so very good question. First off, she hasn't left me, which is fucking amazing, right?
You're pretty much of a hard person to deal with.
Yeah, I can imagine. From outside perspectives, or at least I've been told that in sort of past life when I was a very different person, I can be very difficult. But what have we done? And just sort of the relationship side of things. If you think about what I said earlier, 95% or sorry, 50% of my time is being spent outside of Amsterdam. Well, that meant that I was only here for maybe max a couple of weeks at a time. And so there was always coming back, which brought this whole novel, new, kind of fresh perspective, which is great in some ways. And so, whereas before I thought I was running to the next step, now I'm able to settle in. And that includes with my relationship with my fiance. And she, first off, is incredibly tolerant of a rather busy lifestyle. But if anything, we've grown a lot closer. Part of that is of course, because we have spent a lot more time together, but we've been able to cook more meals at home together. We've been able to have more in-depth conversations, etc. During the day, we have I wouldn't call them separate lives, but like obviously she has her career, I have my career. We're both working from home. She works in another room. I work in this little dojo here. And we come together for things like lunch on occasion. Of course, dinner is always together because we're not allowed to really go out and see other people. Well, sorry, that's wrong. We are allowed to go out and see other people, but see other people in the sense of lockdown. But at the same time, we're able to have more frequent meals together. And one of the things that I enjoy about our time together is that she can talk about anything, which is great because if you look at our podcast, it's kind of reflective of all of the things that I'm interested in. I'm interested in philosophy. I'm interested in nutrition. I'm interested in the environment and how it impacts us. We're going to have some stuff on coming up on activism. And so she's able to carry those conversations and, is interested in those things just as much as I am. And so one of the things that we've been able to integrate in our lives is sort of daily walks and going outside. We live very, very close to a park here in Amsterdam. So at least going outside once a day together and kind of spending some time in the park on the weekends, going for that coffee and just chatting about world events and what our views are on them with a kind of a non-judgmental stance, meaning that she may not always agree with me. I may not always agree with her, but that's okay. And we have very, very friendly debates along that line. So it's been fun. It's been challenging at times, right? Like there's times I'm the type of person that needs to kind of regenerate alone sometimes. And you're not really given that space in this environment. So you have to find more creative ways to do it.
Yeah, you can unpack a lot of things from that. I mean, there's the fact of relationship, in my opinion, that I'm sure that a lot of people listening to this are single. Because busy people tend to be single at times.
Yeah.
Especially entrepreneurs and people who go like with the work kind of route. But the thing is, the beautiful thing you've presented here is to look for somebody, I guess, who's looking to a similar place that you're looking to.
Yeah.
And then like whether you're doing marketing, whether you're doing completely different things, if you guys are intrigued by similar things, not the same things, but similar things, they can always cross paths, and these subjects can always kiss, and she can fill up your cup a little bit, and you can fill up her cup a little bit. And
let me add to that a little bit here, because please. I think what's in I've had a number of relationships in my life, and what's actually helped make this one work is that we complement each other very well, in the sense that we are very different and in many ways, and we look at the world in different ways. And so she helps fill in, going back to earlier what I said about biases and sort of looking at the world in certain ways and being fed continuous information that supports those biases that we all have, and we certainly all have those biases. She challenges those, and so she comes from a different angle and challenges those.
Reminds me of someone.
What's that?
That a person who challenges biases.
A little bit, a little bit. And so she certainly helps me kind of challenge my thinking, and we complement each other very well. And so that's worked well in our relationship. We're definitely not the same people, and we both have our own independent lives, but when we come together, we make each other better. And so that's sort of what I really enjoy most about our relationship.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, relationships are an amazing topic in my
Hmm.
opinion, and
I
because
may I may pull her on
yeah,
the podcast soon, so let's see
yeah,
what
okay,
happens.
yeah, let's leave that for another
Mhm.
podcast. But let's have a little switcheroo here.
Yeah,
What's a switcheroo? Like I got a little
technical term, right?
a little language barrier, so I say words that kind of have to do with what we're gonna do. We're just gonna switch a subject right now,
Okay, yeah, yeah.
and
We'll jump to another topic.
yeah, let's talk about some episodes we've had this year. I mean,
So you've
I
had I mean, dude, how many
yeah,
episodes have we done together now?
I I lost track. I think after about 100, I lost track.
Yeah,
But yeah, we've been doing this for a minute, so
yeah.
yeah. What?
I guess let's talk. I want to ask you this question. What's been your
Well,
favorite couple of episodes this year?
oh man, there were. I mean, you know what? I'm gonna pull up Angela.
Hmm.
Just because I've been looking to kind of shift my mindset, and I've been reading a lot into epigenetics and into the science of what you would call depression,
Hmm.
what in Zen in kind of Kaizen they might call fear,
Hmm.
and I feel like Angela's episode really awoke a lot of things in me.
Hmm.
Um, because she was talking from a very, very sincere, deep story place.
Yeah, she was pretty
So,
raw about that whole conversation, right?
wow, I was sitting with my jaw dropped, like tears in my eyes, like in some of these points.
Hmm.
She's wow. She wowed me.
Hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
Very cool.
Let's start with one that you really
Yeah,
like.
look, there's kind of, if you look at how the podcast has been flowing, I generally go down various wormholes of topics that I'm interested in. On certain times of the year, we've gone through episodes around anxiety. Certain times of the year, we've gone into productivity. Certain times of the year, we've gone more into sort of that nutrition, but also cognitive enhancement. And so, um, if you look at the episodes, let me frame that question in terms of the episodes where I've learned the most.
Mm,
The one that first comes to mind is that episode with Greg McKeown, right? And so you can
yes.
read, and Essentialism is one of the few productivity books, and I think it may be the only one where I continually revisit it, probably a
Mm,
couple times a year,
mm,
because there's this tendency, at least from my end, that I think I could do everything. And so I'm
mm,
naturally going to try to do everything. But the fact is that when you add more to the list, you end up with this sort of diluted uh, quality, if you will. And so when I had that episode with him offline, he told me, he's like, yeah, it sounds like you're going to have a few tougher conversations. And I certainly did.
mm.
And since then, I've been able to focus more and been able to get more done in sort of my chosen direction rather than just saying, like, hey, I'm good at that, so maybe I should do it. My perspective has more been to pause for 5 seconds and just kind of look at it and say, I'm good at that, but do I need to do
Mm,
it, or is it better for somebody else, or is it something that just doesn't serve my purpose or my sort of overarching goal, if you will. And
yeah.
so that's one that comes to mind. I think the episode with Dom D'Agostino, which was our most downloaded episode of the year, is just fascinating more from the sense of how he structures himself, because Dom is, I mean, I hate the term influencer, but he's certainly a big figure in the ketogenic world. He's incredibly knowledgeable and one of the foremost experts on the ketogenic diet. And he still gives most of that influence over to charity in the sense that it all goes back into the research. Because, and when I looked at how he structures life, it kind of made me shift how I look at things like revenue from other businesses. Like, how can I use it to make a bigger impact rather than necessarily using it to buy a latest gadget or whatever it is. So that those are a couple of the ones that I really, really liked. Obviously, there's little tidbits I can pull out of every episode, like Josh Holland, great episode on movement.
Yeah.
But how he looks at awareness through movement is just, to me, just super, super special. And Julian, who is now become a pretty good friend here in Amsterdam, and that episode around more how he looks at anxiety and depression as functions and how he can use movement to manipulate those functions so that he can overcome those situations. Great episode too. So I get a little bit out of every episode for the most part, but those are kind of the ones that come to mind right away.
Same. I mean, for sure, I have in my notes, I always have notes from people and from things they've said or books they recommended or stuff like that, because these people are walking gold mines. And to be honest, I've reached out to a bunch of these people, and you've connected me with some of these, and I have actually that a few that became my clients as a podcast editor. And just, I mean, the bandwidth of things, like the amount of things people are doing in the world is just like insane amount of things and wealth and all these things. Something that came up to me in the beginning of what you were saying was hard conversations, meaning could you expand on that just like a little bit?
Sure. I elaborated on this a little bit, I think, on our last gem session, or maybe even the first one. There was this point in time over the first half of the year where I thought I could do a lot more than I could. And look, I know I have an above average bandwidth, and there's a lot I've done to my life in order to construct that bandwidth. But it's like going to, I don't know, pick your developing country and having that experience with the internet. If you have 10 people logged onto the internet at one given time, you may have diluted bandwidth in that sense, and your web pages may load slower. So when I was having tough conversations, was revolving around taking that diluted bandwidth and kind of making it less diluted. So trimming off the fat, so to speak, of the things that I was trying to do in the world. This included peeling back my involvements in certain companies. This included peeling back some of the other ideas that I wanted to brew, and really just taking that sort of Derek Sivers approach to life and saying, if it's not a fuck yes, it's a no. And that obviously leads to a bunch of conversations. You don't necessarily, I don't really want to just disappear. I had to have tough conversations with people about my involvement in their various organizations and say, like, hey, I can no longer be this person for you because my focus is elsewhere. I need to peel back my time. And what's amazing about that is when you prepare for these conversations, you always anticipate them to be worse than they're going to be for the most part. And people really appreciate honesty in terms of your bandwidth, because the last thing that they want is to be chasing you all over God's creation to just really get you to respond to an email. And so when I started to pare those things back was when I could really pump up the gas, so to speak, on what really matters to me.
So now you feel way lighter.
I do. I'm not perfect yet. I mean, we're all just
nobody's perfect.
Yeah, exactly. We're all just sort of an ever evolving organism anyway. But for me, it's there are going to be more conversations that need to be had, but I'm on that right path. And I know how those conversations need to go. And I'm also much more, excuse me, I'm also much more careful about what I say yes to now. There's something that Rolf Dobeli says in his book, I think it's called The Art of the Good Life, where it's the 5-second no. And so what he outlines in there is we have all these, I mean, I'm sure you have this too, Roy, right? You have people that reach out to you and they say like, hey, can I have coffee, whatever. And or hey, can I have coffee? Hey, can I have a phone call with you? Hey, can I um, take 20 minutes of your time to ask you about this? And in principle, 20 minutes of your time is not much, but if you say yes to all of those tasks, if you will, or all of those things, pretty soon you have very diluted focus. And so in that book, he outlines a way to just avoid that. And so what he says is the 5-second no. And so for me, how has that manifested itself? Rather than saying yes to everything right away, I usually just give a kind of a templated answer of I'll come back to you, and then I'll take it back and figure out, okay, what do I actually need to do? Because there are people that I would love to have coffee with, there are people that I would love to speak with, but is it necessarily the right time for that conversation? Or is it necessary at all? And having that perspective and taking it back and thinking about it has saved me a lot of time and certainly given me a lot of focus.
Definitely, I can highly resonate with that because
Mm-hmm.
in the music world, people want a piece of you when you become someone. I'm not saying that I'm like this master producer now producing for Rihanna or whatever, but
But
it's
you should
just
check out his shit, people. Like it's really good. So,
appreciated.
mm-hmm.
Project dropping real soon, but anyway, um, the thing is that people see you, people see how you move, and then they want a piece of that,
Mm-hmm.
regardless if it's just for coffee or and there are two types of people in my mind. There are people who genuinely want to create a conversation with you, and there
Mm-hmm.
are just people who look to drain you from your information,
Yeah.
which is, again, it's okay. Like giving you usually get something back, but sometimes a person energy just feels off, and you don't have to have you don't need any explanation. Sometimes I went ecstatic dancing the other day because
Oh,
that's what
that
you
sounds
do.
like that's what you do in Bali, of course.
Yeah,
Can you
with the
explain this static dancing for people? Because I've done
oh
it
yeah,
before, but I want to,
for
the
sure.
audience may not be as familiar.
Yeah, so except for surfing and making music, I just love experiencing spiritual practices. And
Mm-hmm.
one is ecstatic dancing, which is just like you come to a space and you just dance your ass off. And the rule, like a rule, is you can't just like start staring at people. It doesn't work like that. You can't talk to people. Whoever wants to be by themselves will be by themselves, and it's just like an energy thing.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say there was this one dude who was just walking there, and he was super high energy, and it was just not where I was feeling. And I saw this person, and my energy, like, you get to a place in ecstatic dancing where you just feel energies.
Mm-hmm.
You don't judge, you just feel.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt it was way too intense for me, so I walked away,
Mm-hmm.
like literally just like boom, shot myself to the other side of the room,
Yeah.
and felt so relieved.
Mm-hmm.
Not because this person was a bad person, just because you talked about a 5-minute no, and I love that because sometimes you gotta have a whole body yes to things.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
that's the other side of things, where your body just like gets excited and pumped, and you're like, holy hell, this is the project that I've been waiting for. I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
it happened to you, where you're like, this thing clicks with me.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
um so just taking it back, sometimes an energy doesn't feel right, and you
Yeah.
can't put your finger on it. You just like, this doesn't feel right,
Mm-hmm.
so you just go with the no. Yeah,
Yeah.
don't, yeah.
So I've developed somewhat of a, not really a framework. Well, I guess it is a framework in a way for dealing with these sort of things. Um,
Yeah.
Unless the person comes out, if they reach out to me and they seem genuine, I'm willing to play the tit for tat game, which is just going back to game theory, right? So, I do something for you, you do something for me, kind of thing, and just kind of seeing how that relationship develops. In
Mm,
many cases, it develops just fine, and it's a mutual discovery and seeing if we have the ability to collaborate together. But in often cases, you mentioned something earlier about this sort of vampiric tendency or parasite tendency of people.
mm,
In often cases, people just want to suck stuff from you, but they're not really willing to engage in a mutually beneficial conversation.
mm,
And so in those cases, I try to avoid it. And there are ways to really identify those types of people very quickly. And I do find that tit for tat works quite well in just figuring out if this is going to work or not. But it's a long learning process, that's for sure.
yeah, definitely. And that doesn't always come fast. It's
No.
just like if you're on the other side, you're on the asking side of it, expecting something back is always the worst thing, and that I found out
Yeah.
from doing these things. Expecting that result back, that feedback, that
Hmm.
whatever, if you're on the giving side of things,
Hmm.
is a very hard thing, because you're basically working for free
Yeah.
for with another person, giving your value. um
Yeah.
and and that's why I think setting a time period for that tat, if you work with that person for a whole month and you hear nothing back from them, so they might be unappreciative of your work. It's just like, I feel like it's just like how humans would work.
Yeah, exactly.
um
And we just need to. I, I, I don't think tit for tat is an instantaneous thing, and I certainly want to give more than I receive. But
for
there
sure.
is a point where you ask yourself the question of, is this a mutually beneficial relationship, or is the person
Mm,
just out for themselves? And that may take some time, and each one is different. But in order to make the world just easier or more
mm,
simplistic in a way, I'm almost 100% of the time. The exception there being is if the person just comes across as sort of a brazen asshole, then I almost 100% of the time I will respond at least the first time and just
yeah.
kind of see where this goes.
Mm.
But yeah, man, it's a definitely a learning process.
Hell yeah, man. We went on quite a little tangent there. I
We
love
did,
that.
we did.
I love that. But
Take
I
us
think it
back, my
actually,
man.
it actually leads us back to kind of to, what, something that I wanna touch, because you've had so many things happening in your world.
Mhm.
Um, what's been like recent experiments that you've been dabbling with in these past few months that we've jammed last time?
Yeah, very good question. So, uh, first off, the last time we jammed, the sun was out a lot later, in the
Mm,
sense that it was still, I think, it was September, and so we were still had sunlight well into the evening. Now, just to set the framework for people, the sun doesn't come up until 9:30 a.m. and it goes down around 4:30. So there's not that much sunlight during the day. And there's obviously a lot of people that suffer from things like seasonal affective disorder, and seasonal affective disorder being sad or kind of depression, etc. In the first year that I moved to Amsterdam, I got some instances of that, meaning like, I was just kind of mopey. I wasn't able to get a lot of stuff done, etc. And so one of the things that I went out and purchased when I figured out that we were actually going to be here this holiday season, because for us, we usually travel around the holidays. We usually go south, and the plan was to go to New Zealand this year. But that obviously didn't happen because you can't get into New Zealand right now without a Kiwi passport. And
mm,
so I went and purchased a UVB lamp, and I can't show it to you right now because it's right behind this camera, but it's essentially the light bulbs that they use for snake lights. And UVB leads to the production of vitamin D. And so I can sit under there for 5 to 7 minutes a couple times a week and get my vitamin D levels up. It also can be used to help sync circadian rhythms. And so the experiments that I've been running on that side of things has been, okay, how do I get my circadian rhythm optimized at a time when the sun isn't really present, which the sun being the foremost syncer of circadian rhythms. And so what I've done is I've got the UVB light. I've, of course, got this red light here from Sauna Space, and I've been using those strategically to help kind of manipulate my states, if you will. A few other things that I've been playing around with, which has been absolutely fun, are work from home workflows. And I continually come back to the Pomodoro technique as sort of what I use best for productivity. But some of the things that I've tried are theming days. And so theming days meaning things like, Saturday is marketing day or whatever it is, and Sunday is planning day, those kind of things, or Monday is planning day, as an example.
Love it.
And theming days and just making sure that those days have a particular focus. I've also changed up my morning routine initially to embrace more randomness and to make it less or more anti-fragile in a way. So 3 months ago, I was quite strict about a morning routine. Now, because I work with a team in California, and by the time I wake up, it's pretty late in the evening in California, I do have to catch up on some things before they go to bed. And so I've embraced a little bit more randomness in the morning with the idea of bringing some of that structure back later in the day. And so let me explain what I mean by that. When I wake up in the morning, the first thing I still do, and I outlined it earlier, is meditation. I still get my reading done. But after that, I'm okay to check in with Slack, email, whatever it is, and just see what's going on in the world, because there are some things that it would be helpful for me to have their perspective on before they go to bed. And we may have to volley a few questions. And so I've embraced that putzing that Jeff Bezos would call in the morning. I try to get that all sort of wrapped up by 10 a.m., including my workout. And once that's all done, then I'll go into just, okay, what am I going to get done today? And the hope is over time that this habit builds, that my quote unquote deep work session, and we can get into why I don't like Cal Newport very much later, but my hope is that I can develop the system so that my actual deep work periods start around 10 a.m. and kind of last through that middle part of the day, which is actually very, very challenging.
Yeah, man.
But we've got a lot of experiments. On the diet side, I recently noticed some sensitivity in my gut from just various things that I've been eating. And, around Thanksgiving time, the diet, we're all human, right? And so sometimes you try foods that don't necessarily serve you. And I started realizing that I was like getting this experience of bloating, and I'm like, wow, what is this? And so recently I've developed a little bit more of a heavier fasting protocol, a low FODMAP diet, which FODMAPs are just simply certain types of sugars that you can remove from your diet. And it's pretty restrictive. So it's a part elimination diet over the next couple of weeks, just to see which of those are triggering that bloating feeling. But more on that probably next year when we do a jam session on that.
Next year. Whoa.
Yeah,
That
it's crazy.
sounds,
2021.
That sounds far. That sounds so far.
Yeah. Dude,
no.
you're in Bali, so enjoying the moment, right?
I'm definitely getting my vitamin D. As you see, my hair is getting that. It's getting
Yeah,
there.
you look like you're ready, to leave hip hop and go into 80s glam rock, but that's
right. Or being a Super Saiyan. But But yeah, wow, there's so many points that came out from this morning routine. I've also, I'm in a new location now, so I had to change all my everything basically.
Because your clients are all in other time zones, right?
Right, definitely. So I start in the morning, I wake up, I open my Tinder.
Oh, there you
And no,
go.
I'm just kidding. But I wake up. I also try to meditate and stretch. I've been feeling quite a bit of like tense around my neck. So I usually start my morning with like spins and not spins, like body. Yeah, I guess like body composition stuff and a bunch of warm ups and things that I picked up from movement, and just do them in the morning. Get my body moving, do a 10-minute meditation usually.
Yeah.
Then I open up my my phone and see if I got messages from my clients in America, to see that we got everything straight and we're good to go. And then I usually go out for surf for me, because here in Bali, I've been lucky enough to get in here and there's waves every day almost. So no, there's waves every single day, actually, if I look for them enough. I go surf. Usually it's about a 2-hour thing. Another thing I've incorporated in my morning before I go surfing is I bought some MCT oil
Oh
and butter.
man, Roy the
Yeah.
biohacker, a little bulletproof
Yeah.
coffee.
I mean, I'm a bit late to that train, but I kind of, I started incorporating bulletproof into my day, because regular coffee just gets me jittery as hell. I think I'm very sensitive. So bulletproof coffee in the morning, I actually throw a banana inside, so I get that extra energy.
Yeah.
I don't
Are
know
you
if it's a
using
thing,
are you
but
using regular coffee or decaf?
regular,
Yeah.
definitely
I
regular.
just
Just
uh
like,
I
yeah.
just went decaf for
Ooh, holy hell.
basic, like I've cut out caffeine for the past couple of weeks. I gotta say, like I'm sleeping so much better, which is awesome.
Wow.
But anyways, let's
Yeah.
go back to how does bulletproof coffee help your surfing? Does it?
So not only my surfing, I feel like it might be the MCT. There's not enough research behind it, but I just don't feel as many cravings
Yeah.
along my day. I don't
Mm-hmm.
feel the need to just like grab sweets, which I do have a sweet tooth. I think we
Mm-hmm.
talked about it.
Yep.
And just I don't have all these needs, because I have the energy and I have the what I need from my body to go on. So I would usually go for a surf after the bulletproof coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And from there I go to the sauna. We have a sauna here that is we have a sauna and a cold plunge and a
Yeah.
spa, and that's been transformative for me. It's been
Good.
just like going in for that. It's not a 3 degrees Celsius, but it's a 13 degrees Celsius, which is cold enough to really challenge you.
Mm-hmm.
So a cold plunge, I get into that cold plunge. I can get in there for like 8 to 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So I do sauna, cold plunge, hammam, like the steam room, plunge again, steam room, plunge, and then
You're
maybe, yeah.
you're whetting my appetite, man. Like this makes me miss Bali even more.
Oh man, so sorry for that, but anyway, I usually finish with cold,
Mm-hmm.
and then I feel like Superman.
Yeah.
But then I'm going to eat something,
Yep.
which would be my only big meal of the day usually.
Mm-hmm.
So and that's the thing. I feel like the coffee is still there, like the energy is still high, so I
Mm-hmm.
can go through that meal and keep going with my day.
Good.
That's what I've been feeling in my life. But that's when I start work, which would be at, I know it's late, but around 12 o'clock,
Mm-hmm.
probably something like that, 11, 12 o'clock
But
in the
it
evening.
works for you, right? And I think, if anything, during this whole work from home situation, we've realized something, which I've been kind of harping on for a while in this future work world, is that really what matters is you just get the work done, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
who gives a shit if you start at 9 a.m. and finish at 5 p.m.? Like
Right.
just get the work done whenever you can at your best workflow. I know for me, like that's usually in the morning. And so I'm
Yeah.
much better at getting things done in the morning than I am in the afternoon, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also better in the evening than I'm in the afternoon. And you can work with
Mm.
that strategically to like just have it work. And if you want to go
Sure.
surfing in the middle of the day, that's totally fine.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people who kind of, and me included, I've sinned in that, which I like. I blame myself for being demotivated in certain times of the day,
Mm-hmm.
and it just, you just got to listen sometimes. As cliche as it sounds, freaking listen to your body for a
Yeah.
second, and see that you might be. I'm not fucking functional after 8 p.m. I'm not very functional. My body's
Yeah.
not. My body wants to start going to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I'll get maybe some a little bit of writing done or something like that would just like end my day peacefully.
Good.
And that's the thing I feel like. And I want to take it back to Cal Newport, because you say you had a few things that you kind of
Disagree with him on?
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the Cal, I appreciate what he's done in terms of how he's written books and all this stuff, and he's done a decent amount of research. But I think there's context with everything, right? And so uh, Cal Newport preaches, deep work, digital minimalism, etc. And rather than kind of this gets to a dogmatic approach of towards productivity, and I think that's pretty dangerous, just like dogmatic approaches to diets are. Because if you tell a Wall Street trader to go and do 3 hours of deep work during the day, he's going to go tell you to fuck off.
Yeah.
If you go and tell an influencer to stay off of social media, that's kind of stupid because that's how they make their money. And
Right.
so with everybody, there's different approaches. And I know for my life, I have a hybrid approach between David Allen, who's been on the show,
Yeah.
and Cal Newport, who at some point I would like to have him on the show. But he wrote this article. The major issue that I have with Cal Newport right now is that he wrote an article, I think for the New Yorker or New York Magazine, about how getting things done was dead and just the structure for getting things done at a high level.
GTD.
Yeah,
You
GTD.
like that? Okay.
And
David
so
Allen's stuff, which
yeah,
is
and he
amazing.
just
Yeah.
he wrote this article, but it had no real substance to it other than
Mm.
people have problems with GTD over the long term. And that is true. It's very hard to adhere to over the long term, but that doesn't mean it can't be used as a tool for some. And so by saying that is dead, which I guess he did for clickbait purposes, he in effect really just kind of cast off this whole idea as nonsense, which GTD has helped millions of people around the world just kind of get their head together. And in fact, if you actually look at the components of GTD, what it's trying to do is get you into sort of a Zen-like state by having you get stuff out of your brain and onto paper. Whereas Cal Newport's very much a fan of not using inbox zero and other strategies, but his article was not very substantive in terms of what is the next approach after GTD, because deep work certainly doesn't work for everyone. And so I think there's a medium there, which I hope he expands on in the future, or at least I'd love to bring him on the show and talk to him about it a little bit.
For sure. I have to address something, and like, not everybody likes Catholicism, but you know
Yeah.
what? Some people do amazing things with Catholicism being the theme to their life,
Ooh.
and or or whatever religion. You can take it anywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are people doing amazing things in every field, and I'm sure there are people who really benefit from Cal Newport. But my problem was, I was actually, you want another thing? I was in a tantric workshop a few weeks back, and
Oh, that's fun.
yeah, it was fun. It was just like, it was also a clickbait kind of thing. It was like the
Mm-hmm.
webinar approach to things. They were promoting their workshop and whatnot, but there was a girl and a guy, and the guy was always caressing the girl, and like they're so perfect together,
Ooh.
and blah blah blah. And the thing was, she was giving advice, and she was like, love is not porn, love is not, she starts like sounding like a preacher.
Wow.
And it really, like, that's the moment when I shut off. It was like halfway through the workshop,
Mm-hmm.
and it was clearly a person who's not in my opinion, it's clearly not a person who's very balanced about their thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
because they're not presenting it in a balanced way.
Yeah. Yeah.
A scientist, when a scientist talks to you, and your listeners can challenge me and just go back, they never say it's like that. They say science suggests blah
Yeah.
blah blah, because there's always, in science, there's always a room for doubt,
Yeah.
which is what I love about science. And that's what's also like very, very dangerous with cult leaders, or
Yeah.
religion, that people just come up to you and say, if you don't do this and this and this, you're gonna die in hell. And it's like, whoa, wait 1 second, what if I
Mm-hmm.
do want to follow? Why are you pushing me so far away?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And that's what this article is about for me. It pushes me away. It makes me want to use these methods less.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And look, not everybody's a productivity nerd too. And so for some people, they're just fine where they are. But if you're looking for productivity information, I would just encourage people to check out all sides of the story before picking one.
Definitely. Yeah, I want to lead this conversation to another place,
Mm-hmm.
because you lead all the conversations you do, and
Oh,
I want some of that. I want some of that. I want some of that leading
okay.
power.
Okay.
So let's take that, because we've talked about books that we kind of liked and maybe less agree with. Let's take some of your favorite reads, the ones you use for your breakfast, your
Yeah.
breakfast books, and
My
what
breakfast of champions.
yeah, and what you're actually up to in terms of favorite reads for 2020.
Yeah. So let me I mentioned earlier, and we kind of gave a teaser about this morning routine where I read a chapter from 4 different books, and those 4 books are all revolving around the theme of decision making. 2 of them are actually by the same author, but The Art of the Good Life by Ralph Dobeli, The Art of Thinking Clearly, also by Ralph Dobeli. The Tao of Charlie Munger right now, although that can be swapped out with Poor Charlie's Almanac at any given time. And then the 4th one being Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. And so all of those have to deal with how to make better decisions, because one of my main involvement is requiring me to make a lot of better decisions faster. And so it's really working on that muscle, if you will, to make better decisions. Now, that's sort of the first part of the morning. It takes less than an hour to read those 4 chapters. In fact, it's probably more like 30 minutes. Now, you asked a question about favorite reads of the year, and I have to glance over at the bookcase in some cases, because there are many, many good reads from the year, but let's just start rattling them off. You just hinted at religion. So I've obviously gone through a deep investigation of spirituality and what that is to me. And one of the books that's helped me with that is The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. And that goes a lot more into just sort of the parts of organized religion that I didn't necessarily agree with growing up, but also helps me kind of look at the parts of the organized religion that don't really make sense, and at least to me, and that's been helpful as well. Now let's kind of look at some of the other reads. Annie Duke has a new book out also on decision making, which the name escapes me. It's on my Audible, but I think it's called How to Make Decisions, and she's absolutely fascinating. She takes a lot of Daniel Kahneman's work and makes it more reachable for people, which is obviously useful. Um, a lot of my health focused research this year has gone into the cannabis space and kind of looking at the endocannabinoid system and how that helps things like our nervous system and neurotransmitters, and is involved in so many bodily processes, but we know very little about it. And so the Cannabis Pharmacy is certainly a good book to look into on that. Now, it's because cannabis is continually coming out with new information, new science, as it becomes easier to do the research. It may get outdated soon, but Cannabis Pharmacy is certainly a very interesting book. I would recommend the hard copy book or paper copy rather than the audiobook, because the audiobook gets tough to follow at certain times.
Mhm.
Uh, and then I'm just trying to think of what else I've been pulling around these days. Well, let's there's, from a classic startup point of view, the one that I always go back to is Crossing the Chasm, and that's a great book. Now, this is a business book, and from another point of view, looking at psychedelics, is Inner Paths to Outer Space. And if anything, I've become more convinced that these substances can play a role when used correctly and responsibly in helping with mental health. And so I know that from personal experience, but I also know from some of the things that MAPS is doing in phase 3 trials
Mm,
with the FDA
yeah.
on along MDMA and PTSD, and some of the things that could be going on in the psilocybin space. It's all very, very exciting to me. And so if you look at my focus, obviously I have a very diverse focus for reading. I still read passages from the Vedas, for instance, every once in a while when I need to sleep, because it's very good for that. But also, it's just a fascinating book that's been around for thousands of years. And so very, very diverse reading again. But I like to take these books and kind of extrapolate little pieces from them and see if they can kind of go across different knowledge platforms, in the sense that what can I learn from the Cannabis Pharmacy that may apply to productivity,
Mhm.
and those kind of that kind of critical thinking, if you will, has served me very, very well. And I believe it kind of touches a little bit on orthogonal thinking, which is a core tendency of mine that I embrace. But that's just some of them. I do read quite ferociously, so probably put down at least a book a week. And I know of others that put down a book a day, and I haven't gotten there yet.
No more Blinkist?
I do have Blinkist. I use, I mean, but I don't necessarily count those. I use Blinkist in a different form than I used to. So Blinkist actually serves two purposes for me. I guess the original purpose is how I used to use it, which is how to devour business books, because there's dozens of business books that get published each week, and most of them, the idea can be summarized in 1 or 2 pages, which is what Blinkist does for me. The other way I use it is a screen before buying books. And so I'll listen to the
Mm,
Blinkist. And if I really, really like the book, then I'll go out and buy it, because, or if I like the concepts in the book, I'll go out and buy it, because I know that Blinkist is only able to capture so much in 10 to 15 minutes, or however long the audio Blinkist is. But it's extremely useful tool for helping me identify where I want to invest more money, more time in a longer book.
mm. A segment I want to add to what you were saying is,
Mm.
do you have any new gadgets that you've been messing with since our last conversation?
Yeah, I mean, let's look at that. So, the inertia wave, I'm not sure if I talked about that the last conversation, but the inertia wave is sitting right here. And it's kind of like a battle ropes gone wild. And it's very, very good for core exercises. And actually, our mutual friend Josh Holland got me turned on to those. But it's good for, I mean, it's very, very good for core exercises. I have the UVB lamp, which I mentioned earlier, and
Yeah.
that helps with, that certainly helps with, getting vitamin D here in the winter. And
I'm
one of the things,
feeling like a snake.
Yeah, exactly. Feeling like a snake.
You'll
Exactly.
start doing.
Have you ever taken one of those obnoxious Harry Potter quizzes online to see what
No.
house? No, yeah, I did once, and I tested into Slytherin for some reason. I don't know what that means about me, but maybe that means I could speak snake or something. Um,
Mm,
let's see what else. I got a whole new work from home setup, right? And so what I did was is I invested more time focusing on how do I make this sort of Zen Den dojo, if you want,
yeah.
much more productive for me. And
Mm,
so I ended up with a curve screen, the new Apple Mac Mini, and like the speed at which I can do things is a lot faster. And so this entire construct of stuff with me, behind me, etc., has been developed to help me just get in states of flow a lot easier. That being said, another thing that's coming today and that I'm looking forward to report back on later is a sauna blanket. And so you have access to an infrared sauna where you are. I will now have a blanket at home because gyms are closed here, so I can't necessarily go and get in a sauna cabin, but I'll be able to have a sauna blanket here. And then the last thing really is the pin in my arm, which is a continuous glucose measurement device. And so the company is called Veri, Veri. I've done an Instagram live with these guys. It's on the IGTV. But I'm fascinated by the idea of measurement and have
yeah.
been like, that's one of the foundational things that we've talked about in this podcast many, many times.
Yeah.
But glucose is one of those markers that's so easy to measure. We can now measure it continuously, and you can look at your reaction to things like exercise, reaction to things like cold plunging in canals, which is what I've been doing quite frequently, reaction to things like sauna, but also how foods react to you or react for you. And so that allows you to get more bio individualized. And if
Mm,
anything, the conversation always comes back to me to how do I take all of this information out there and make it useful to myself. And
mm.
continuous glucose measurement has definitely helped me in that arena.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to hear more about that. I mean, like Dasha's been doing it on her side,
Yeah.
and that's been cool. I feel
Mhm.
like your progress would be something that that I would be interested in knowing more about. But
Mhm.
yeah, so we're done with gadgets, experiments. Oh, you were talking last time, we were talking quite a bit. You were talking about psychedelics. Do you still do you
Yeah,
still have a little bit of microdosing protocol or anything like that?
I do. And, this is virtue of the fact that I live in a country where these substances are easy to acquire and in
Yeah.
most cases legal.
Yeah.
And so I'm able to try these things at my leisure. I do have a microdosing protocol where I do it twice a week, and that helps me with anything from focus, but also, there's oftentimes in life that we all get sucked into the weeds or the matrix, so to speak. And how do you create that distance for yourself in order to recognize what's really, really important, but also to kind of bring you back to center, so to speak. And I find microdosing has helped with that. It has been known to have effects on the ego and kind of dampening that. And the ego, it does certainly serve us to a certain extent and has, from an evolutionary perspective, prevented us from getting killed. But how do you take that evolutionary perspective and now passport it to the modern world? And so the ego can get you in a lot of trouble here. And, by using microdosing substances, it's helped me dampen the ego and make better decisions in many ways. So I still do it about twice a week. I generally like to spend that time either in deep thought or deep work. And it's, I got to say, probably one of the more profound, uh, just entering into that world of psychedelics has been one of the more profound changes that I've had over the past year, at least. So I don't want to recommend it to people because it's not, certainly not for everybody. But there are plenty of websites out there, and we've done an episode with Paul Austin who's become a friend from the third wave. And I would encourage people to check out the third wave, but check out that episode if they want to learn a little bit more about it.
Yeah. In general, these everything we've talked about, it varies, like
Mm-hmm.
we and people on this podcast, they just talk about the things that help them tick.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I feel like we need to have a bit more conversation with the people listening to this,
Yeah.
like anyone who's listening to this right now, we want you to let us know also what you'd like us to touch.
Mm-hmm.
But with that said, what would you like to see? Because we are working on the newsletter.
Yeah, exactly.
Boomer is currently working on a newsletter, and with your, and it needs to be, hand in hand. He wants to provide value for y'all, and if y'all want that value, we want to hear from you, and know what you want to hear more about, because you've heard, like, along the lines here, Boomer is doing a lot of things, but there's not, he if he needs to write about one thing, it'll take a little while. So we want to know from you, what would you like to hear more about, what processes, what, all these kinds of things, so we can get guided into giving you the best content possible, and also bring the best guests.
Yeah,
So
amazing, man. That was
anyway,
very, very well said. Thank you.
I wanna get back to something that you were touching, and that will probably close our
Yeah.
discussion for today. And it's, I said it last time, but you've made a transformation this year,
Mm-hmm.
and you've you've just transformed yourself, and I'm sure that people feel it. But also, I want you to talk about patience, and about the things that you've kind of drew from this whole this whole year of total chaos, which is supposed to bog a lot of people down.
Yeah, that's wow. Okay. So let's see how we can unpack this. You mentioned the word patience, which is something that I almost had the antithesis of. So I was very, very impatient most of my life, and actually trying to force things to either work when they didn't, or to force something to happen sooner than it probably should. And so what's ironic about this year is, uh, I alluded to this many times earlier, but I've spent most of my time on the road in the past, and now I'm forced to sit in one place for a undisclosed period of time. As a result, that has really forced me to develop patience. And so being able to develop patience around that, and being able to say, like, hey, I don't need to accomplish 100 to-dos in every single day. I can take this slow and kind of make sure it's done right. That has been transformative in and of itself. Being patient with other people, and just making sure that, they have what they need in order to succeed. They have what they need in order to thrive, and not necessarily expecting them to behave in whatever convoluted message that I have in my head is. And so that's been transformative in itself. In terms of just things that I've had to do in that process, is just kind of letting go of certain attachments, which I'm not sure how I'm going to expand on that, but I'll get into that in a little bit. But also, uh, I think there's a lot to be learned from great books out there. And so a lot of the stuff that, or a lot of the benefits of 2020 for me, has been able to assimilate a lot of this information that I'm learning from these books, and kind of run these experiments in my life to see what works and what doesn't. And a lot of these books that I'm reading, sometimes the stuff doesn't work, and that's okay. You throw it out. But being able to really take that information in and implement it has been transformative. And then one of the later things, or at least on the sort of brain front, as being able to accept that I don't have to do everything. and if it's okay to say no, and actually embracing no is the path to being more effective. And so I've actually become a lot better at saying no. Uh, Again, it's still a journey to me because I used to be a yes man. Yes, I'll do it. Yes, I'll do it. Because in my old finance career, that served me quite well. But now it's certainly not serving me as well. And so I've been a lot more cognizant of saying no more often. Now, from a, because this is also a conversation around health optimization, there's certain things that I've done throughout this year that has helped me optimize my health and brain power. And so let's get into a couple of those. From a health perspective, sometimes it's easy to ignore the canary in the coal mine at the really benefit of looking at what is sexy. And so this year I focused very, very much on something that wasn't very sexy to me, but I knew would be beneficial. And that has been gut health and just making sure that I have an optimal microbiome for me. Now, we talked a little bit about what's been going on with my diet, but also looking at just making sure and rigorously testing this through things like 3-day stool tests to identify what the bacterial imbalances are, presences of fungus, et cetera, and just making sure that those are actually being dealt with. So embracing the things that are not sexy has been very, very beneficial. On the cognitive side, obviously, I do a lot of work with transcriptions, or I'm part of transcriptions, and that has brought a lot more knowledge to the brain for me, and sort of redefining nootropics as not only chemical compounds but also lifestyle components, and looking at adding more lifestyle components to enhance brain function. And so from lifestyle components, I've really geared my diet towards both optimal nervous system function, so the ability to respond to stress, but also really cognitive function as well. So using strategic things like fasting to help my brain run better. Now, on the compound side of things, what's great about being a part of transcriptions is that I get to experiment with a lot of different compounds in the background that people don't necessarily get to see. I still have this fascination and have talked to Neil Grunberg about nicotine in general. And I think nicotine is one of the most fascinating compounds in the world if you can use it correctly. But also, I love blue carnitine, and it's one of my favorite go-to nootropics in terms of brain performance. So that kind of gives you a landscape of what's been transformative for me over the course of the year. And what's been more funny than anything else is that I went away from finance and towards this health path, and now I'm kind of merging the two, and it's been an amazing journey. And Roy, thank you for being a part of it, my friend.
Hell yeah. I think we should do another podcast about that revolves around this connection between finances and health. And because health and healthy lifestyle brings some, it does bring up some costs, right?
Yeah.
It does bring up some decisions you got to make. What are you investing in? What are you invested in? And I think that we're in that point where maybe next jam session we'll expand on investing.
Yeah, we certainly can. I'd love to do that. My friend, do we need to wrap up here?
I think we've fed people with a bunch of information, and I will repeat.
What's your number one book of the year before we close out?
My number. We're talking about me now.
Sure.
I mean, I've talked about Trevor Moawad in the last podcast, and that book really affected me. I wanna I want to give you a book,
Mm-hmm.
but I've read so many things and I've read about so many subjects this year, but mainly I've learned so much about my nervous system and about
Mm-hmm.
how it works and about fight or flight.
Yep.
And I really recommend people indulge in stuff like stoicism.
Mm-hmm.
And, and if you guys are a part of Waking Up app, then go and try the course. There's a course about stoicism there. It's,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's 1 hour
Yep.
basically of info, but it's golden, and it tells you about negative visualization and breaks down in the most uh, um it's just so tangible, and it makes you learn a lot about it, because I think stoicism can actually eliminate a lot of patterns.
Mm-hmm.
It it's in my life, it's transformative in my
Mm-hmm.
life. I'll tell you that. And Kaizen has been an amazing thing I've been looking into for a while now.
Yeah.
Bob Maurer has some amazing books about it, about just the way that fight or flight works,
Mm-hmm.
and why you shouldn't be ashamed of it.
Yeah.
Because people are, they don't want to be afraid because of this, the way that we see ourselves or
Mm-hmm.
whatnot. So I don't want to give one book away because I think there's so much, but I would look into these. I'm looking into these areas, and now epigenetics has been a big part of that.
Cool. That's something I know a little bit about, so we can chat about that later.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So these are my favorites. I think we want to close it around here. And also, again, like I urge you guys to just like let Boomer know what's up. And because he really, I know that guy, and he puts all his heart and soul to what he does. And I think he deserves to kind of know what's going on your side, and what would you like to know more about. So he can tailor more that content to you. And there's stuff coming up in 2021 that you'll know about very soon.
Yeah.
But with that said, we love hearing from you guys. So just like let us know what's up.
Thank you, Roy. And yeah, Roy's right. There's a lot of stuff coming up in 2021, a lot of really exciting things. We're going to get the Signal, which is the newsletter, rolling out. And I would really appreciate it if you either email me or just get in touch with me on social media and let me know what you want to hear about in those newsletters, because the stuff is for you. Yes, of course, it's somewhat a self-serving exploration and education, but also the stuff is for you guys, the audience. And so, I would encourage you guys all to subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow me on Instagram, get on the email list, because there's going to be a lot of fun shit coming out in 2021.
Fun shit.
Awesome, bro. I appreciate you, Roy. You are an epic individual, and I'm probably interrupting your surf time right now, so I need to let you
Now
go.
you're good. I love you, brother.
Love you too, my friend. Take care, everybody. Thank you for tuning in.